to everyone for coming this morning. I'm very humbled to see so many of you here. I appreciate you taking a few minutes out of your day to share some time with us. And I'm going to talk to you today a little bit about my family, my son Matthew, and some of the experiences that he's had over the last 7 years. We have had a roller coaster of a ride that has been unlike anything any parent would ever want to go through. When it comes to children, got it? Good. When it comes to your children, it's instinct to protect them. It's instinct to want to do everything you can for them. When your child falls down, they bump their knee, what do you want to do? You want to kiss it, put a Band-Aid on it, hug them, and make it better. Well, when that situation escalates into 1 million times that, where they're in an intensive care unit, they have every imaginable lead on them, every imaginable test being performed to try to understand why they're fighting for their life, it's scary. And for a mom, you feel very out of control at that moment. And I was put into that position 7 years ago. I never would have asked for it, certainly didn't expect it. But being on this side of it 7 years later, we can see so much good that has come from it on a lot of different levels, not just at a personal level, but on something that we've been able to take outside of our family into communities to be able to help other children and families. To give you a little bit of backstory about what happened, Matthew is now 11. When he was 4.5 years old, he had tubes and tonsils done, which is super common. How many kids do you know that have had their tonsils removed and tubes put in their ears? I would say probably 8 out of 10 kids are going to have to go through that at some point in their life. Up until the time he was 4, extremely healthy. There were no external issues that we could see. We brought him for his well child visits every time that it was recommended. He had his immunizations. When he was sick, we brought him to the doctor. So as parents, we thought we were doing everything that we needed to do to protect him and keep him safe. And then when the ear infection started and the strep throat started, we were advised, let's go ahead and have this surgery done. From the moment I called my husband, whenever I left the ENT's office, he said, I don't have a good feeling about this. And there was no reason, no basis for it. He said, I'm telling you, I just don't have a good feeling about this. I said, well, you know, this is not something super serious. It's tubes and tonsils. We have tons of friends that have had this done. And he said, there is something in my gut that is telling me it's just not that simple. But we knew that there was really not another alternative at that point. We trusted the doctors. We trusted what we were being told, that this is going to make him better. So the surgery was scheduled for 2 weeks from this date. We had to have a pre-op appointment done with his pediatrician, which we did. And at that appointment, he had his blood pressure taken for the first time ever in his life. And we learned after the fact that his blood pressure was indeed very elevated for a 4.5-year-old child. It was dismissed that he was a little nervous maybe, could be that there was some anxiety there. Rather than trying to calm him down and putting him, letting him sit for a little while and repeating it and see if it was just as high, it was just dismissed that he was okay. So naive at the time that I didn't realize that this was a major game changer. We trusted, and we went in, we sent him in for surgery. We're trusting the doctors and what they're going to do. We're told the surgery goes perfect, like clockwork. The doctor came out, he goes, yes, his tubes were very, very small. We were able to put tubes in, take his tonsils out, his adenoids out. 2 days, you'll never know it. We'll get him eaten, he'll be fine. Kids are super resilient. Well, this doctor has done thousands of these, so I'm trusting everything he's telling us, and my husband still just, I don't have a good feeling about this. So when the doctor came out and told us it was great, I said, is that better? And he goes, no, something's not right. I don't know what it is, but it's just not right. So we take him home that afternoon. He appears to do awesome. He is hungry, which he was never a hungry child, and he said, ooh, I'm hungry, I want something to eat. And I said, we're gonna breeze through this. Well, about 6 hours later, he had taken a nap, and he woke up and he said, I don't feel right, something is not right. And I'm explaining to him, you've had this done today, you've had this medicine, everything is off, so you're gonna feel different, you're gonna feel bad. He goes, no, Mama, he said, something is just different, I don't feel right. And Matthew's always been a very verbal child. He's never talked in baby talk, it's always been full sentences from the time he was a year old. And has spoke very well with proper words and, to describe situations and feelings. Well, he started throwing up, and when he did, I called the doctor, as we were told to do on our little sheet of if this happens, and he said, well, go ahead and bring him in, let's make sure he's not going to dehydrate. And initially the thinking was this was anesthesia related. Because of the medication, his stomach is just a little queasy. So we go to our ER in Baton Rouge, and we got there about 5:30 in the afternoon. And at the time, it wasn't protocol for children who came into the ER to have their blood pressure taken unless they were over the age of 12 or they were trauma patients. Well, he wasn't a trauma patient. He was a kid throwing up that had had a tonsillectomy that morning. So his blood pressure wasn't taken, which, knowing what I know now, blows my mind that somebody who was 6 hours post-op didn't have a blood pressure taken, which is, that's a different subject. But when he sat in the ER, they kept trying to get the vomiting stopped unsuccessfully, and finally the decision was made to go ahead and admit him. And when they got him upstairs after about 6 hours, I guess, of being in the ER, his first blood pressure was taken. And when the nurse did it, she initially looked at the machine and said, "Oh, this machine is not working." And I'm sitting across the room and I'm looking at the machine. I knew zero about blood pressure and what that meant. I knew the normal for an adult was 120/80, and high blood pressure is something old people get. That was my extent of my knowledge, very naive. And when I looked at the numbers, I saw it and it just didn't register, and it was 195/135. For the nursing students and nursing faculty that's in here, you get what that means. If you have high blood pressure or know somebody who does as an adult, you get what that means. For a 4-year-old child who weighed less than 40 pounds, that was super dangerous. She left and got another machine, repeated it with a third machine, and then brought in a charge nurse who did it manually. All 3 readings were confirmed, and she said, "This is not right." So they called the ENT that was on call, called the doctor in the ER, and their advice was to watch him for the next few hours to make sure his blood pressure does start coming down. They said there are some very rare situations where anesthesia can cause someone to elevate and stay up, but as that medication works out of their body, the blood pressure should come down. To look at him while this is going on, there's no signs or symptoms other than vomiting. No headache, no blurred vision, no dizziness, nothing that comes with severe hypertension that you would think are the quote-unquote symptoms. He was fine, other than throwing up. He would sit up, he would throw up, and he would just sit back and watch TV. He wasn't complaining, so there was nothing to make us think that there was anything else going on. Well, after about 6 hours, we had 2 doctors from the PICU sitting on the foot of his bed telling me, "We're the intensivist. We need to admit him to the critical care unit now. There's something seriously wrong with your child. His blood pressure's not going down, it's going up." And I learned at the time that his blood pressures through the night, as they were doing these readings every 30 minutes, were elevating. So he was going in the opposite direction of where they needed him to be. So his blood pressure actually ended up, by the time he got into the PICU, they were seeing systolic numbers of 220, 230, which was scaring them. So very quickly things started moving, and we were admitted to the intensive care unit. When those doors opened and I walked through there with him, my life as I knew it changed completely, forever. We'll never go back to that. There's a lot of things that his childhood and the things that he loved and were there went away for him never to get back. And we were not realizing what world we were stepping into and the longevity of it. And it's been something that has been ongoing since then and will probably continue to go on for his life. After 7 days, we realized there was something with his kidneys. Every test was done to rule out a brain tumor, rule out congenital heart defects, rule out all of these very serious situations. The only thing they could pinpoint was something with his kidneys, but at the time in Baton Rouge, there were no pediatric nephrologists, so they could not give us a definitive diagnosis, and without a diagnosis, there's no treatment. So the doctors were scrambling and trying to say, okay, what do we do to get him treatment? Well, we found a group of nephrologists in New Orleans at Children's Hospital. The doctors in Baton Rouge consulted, and they said, get him here yesterday. We need him like now. So all of the arrangements were made to send a trauma team from New Orleans to come pick him up, because in the course of this 7 days, where he started just throwing up was just declining. Every day you could see a little bit more of him slipping away. The blood pressures, they were doing everything they could to control them. They would give him the medication to lower the blood pressure. He would swing down to about 120. Within 30 minutes, he would swing back up. If you have high blood pressure, you know anybody that does, you know what these swings can do to you to make you just feel yucky. You just feel horrible. And he was fighting really hard, but the longer he fought, the more we could see the fight disappearing. And finally the day came. It was transfer day. Trauma team was coming. We had a new outlook. We were moving forward at this point. It wasn't just stagnant of we don't know and we're going to figure it out. It was we're going somewhere where they're going to help us. We're going to be able to get this taken care of. So we all kind of got up that morning with a renewed excitement. My husband had been staying at night with Connor at home, our youngest. I was at the hospital with Matthew. So when he got up, he comes to the hospital. My best friend, who is also a registered nurse at the Lake, which is the hospital in Baton Rouge, she came as well. So, we're excited. We're talking about the ambulance ride and the trauma nurse is there from New Orleans. We've got the ambulance driver, and they're like, this is going to be a good day. We knew that there was going to be a bedside procedure that had to be done before he could leave. He had an arterial line that had been in all week, and they needed to reposition that, and they also needed to put a central line in. We had blown countless IVs. His blood pressure was so high every time they would place an IV, it wouldn't be very long with the blood pressure surging, we'd lose it. So they said, we'll do the central line, no more pokes. So they said, we're going to sedate him at the bedside. No worries, it'll take us just a few minutes, and then once he's awake and stable, we'll get you guys to New Orleans. So we were asked to step out, and we did. And we waited about 20 minutes and went back upstairs before they called us, because I'm ready to get back to him. And when we go back in, the nurse said, come on in the room. He should be waking up in just a few minutes. Go ahead and talk to him. You know, it's good for him to hear familiar voices as he's waking up. And she said, we just gave him a very light sedative in order to be able to do this bedside. She said, we don't want to put any medications in that's going to complicate anything else. We're trying to keep everything as even as we can. So within just a couple of minutes, we're talking to him and soothing him, and he wakes up, and his eyes are so bright, and he's so lucid, and he's so with it. And he said, you know, this is a good day. He said, we're getting ready to go in the ambulance. I said, yes, we are. Daddy's going to ride with you. I'm going to get my stuff. I'm going to meet you down there. I said, we're fixing to go on a little vacation. So we were good. It was a positive thing. So there's a lot of commotion that's going on in the room. There's a lot of activity. There's nurses in there. There's doctors in there. There's techs in there, trying to make the transition to get him off of all of the monitors from the PICU to get him on the temporary monitors to get him in the ambulance. So during the course of all this, there's still the conversation, and we're kind of hanging out at the bed with him, and then just like that, his eyes roll back in his head, and he's out. And it wasn't just, I'm sleepy. It was out. It was unconscious, out. And the nurse looked at him, and she says, Matthew, come on, Matthew, wake up. And he wasn't waking up, and she realized this was very different than him not just wanting to wake up and taking a little nap. She runs out, and she gets his main PICU doctor, the intensivist. She comes back in, and they're trying to assess the situation. Another doctor leaves after a couple of minutes, and we're just right outside from the nurse's station. We hear this doctor outside, not knowing what's going on from a medical standpoint. We're just knowing he's awake and won't wake up, and we hear this doctor call the PICU in New Orleans and say, we don't know if he's going to make it. Give us a few minutes. We're going to see what's happened after we assess, and we'll call you back, but right now we don't know if he's coming. And I'm hearing that, and my knees just go to jello, because this was not what we wanted to hear. And as parents, we're standing there, and you want to wake him up, and you should be able to wake him up. You know, when you get them up in the mornings for school, you shake them and they wake up. And this wasn't happening. And we looked at him, and he has the most peaceful look on his face. And it was a peaceful look that came over it after he had been out for a few seconds. It's almost a smile that was on his face, and you can see color draining from him. And we are standing there knowing this isn't right from a physical side. And my best friend, who was a nurse, and she looked at me and she said, you get to the head of his bed right now and tell him everything you need to tell him. And I said, what is that supposed to mean? She said, don't ask. Just go tell him what you have to tell him. And I got on one side, and my husband got on the other side, and we bent down, and we're whispering, we love you. We love you so much. You know, you're a fighter. Come on, you've gone through all of this. You need to come back. You need to wake up. We've got things to do. And the more we talked, and the more he didn't wake up, the more helpless I felt. And I'm saying my prayers, and I'm like, please, God, just send him back to me. Whatever you want from this point, I'm yours. But we need him to wake up. And it feels like an eternity. And even now, standing and talking about it, this is an eternity. All of this transpired over a period of about 3 to 5 minutes, which doesn't sound like a lot of time, but when you're in that type of situation, it's every minute of your entire life at that moment. And after a period of time, just like that, his eyes pop open, and there's a collective ah in the room. And he looks up and he says, why is everybody crying? Because by this point, it's my husband and my friend Dawn. We have 2 of the nurses, 1 of the techs, and we even have 1 of the doctors in there that you can see she is tearing up at this point because she had been in there with him the entire week. When she was at the hospital, the first thing she did was come in Matthew's room, and he was the last patient she would see before she left. And there was just this collective sigh. So there's like an urgency from the medical people at this point to, okay, get him as stable as we can, make sure we're good. We had all the monitors on him. The only thing that was on him during the time that this is happening was his O2 stats, and his O2 stats dropped to about 45. His blood pressure cuff had been taken off, so they had done a manual blood pressure. His blood pressure had come down to like 90/40, which for a kid who'd gone from 250 systolics, that's a huge drop. So all of his vitals were trending down over those few minutes. So they got him back on the monitor. His blood pressure, when they did it this time, was back up. It was probably in the upper 180s, 190s, I think is what was in his chart. And they go back and they call the PICU and they said, he's awake, he's alert, he's coming. Get ready, you need neurology, you need to be waiting for him when he gets there. So there was a very hurried, let's get him in the ambulance into New Orleans. And we were about probably 45 minutes to an hour from New Orleans. My husband gets in with him and they take off. And I just hit the bed and I collapsed because that last segment of time had just drained everything I had in me. And I knew that I had to get it together because we still had a very long road to go down. We still didn't know specifically what was wrong with him physically. So when he gets to New Orleans, the very first thing that they had neurology do was meet him, and they said, before we get to kidney stuff, we've got to check brain stuff. And they did a CT of his brain. They had a full neurology consultation. And when I got there, the neurologist had just gotten all of the results. And when she comes in the room, she said, you must be Miss Goodwin, you're Matthew's mother. I said, yes. And she said, I'm with neurology. We've done his CT scan. I said, okay, so what did you find? What happened? She said, I have very good news for you. She said, his brain is perfect. I said, okay, that is good news. Now, what happened in Baton Rouge? And she said, do you believe? And I didn't even ask, do I believe in what? I just instinctively thought, okay, God. Well, of course I do. I've lived on prayers for the last week more than I've ever wanted to in my life. And she said, sometimes in medicine, there are things that science just can't explain. And I said, what is that supposed to mean? You're a doctor, with all due respect, you're a doctor with a lot of education and a lot of training. You tell me what happened to him. I'm tired of everybody telling me, I don't know what's wrong. Give me an answer. And she said, there is nothing I can tell you. There was no stroke, there's no coma. His gray matter is perfect. His brain is perfect. There's been no damage from the high blood pressure. She said, there are things in medicine sometimes we just can't explain. She said, my advice to you is the next time you sit down and say your prayers, she said, send up an extra prayer, thanks. And with that, she smiled and she turned and she walked off. And I sat there for a minute and thought that was the most bizarre conversation I've ever had with a doctor in my life. I took that as being, okay, this is good. I left it at that. That was settled. We knew the brain was okay. We had to get back to the more serious issue of why we're here. Let's get to the kidney stuff. Let's figure out what's going on. The nephrology group got on top of things. Within 4 hours, we knew he had renal artery stenosis. We had a definitive diagnosis. We knew the main artery to his kidney had decreased blood supply. The extent of it was significant. The percentages that they gave us was anywhere from 80 to 90% that he had a blockage. So there was no blood that was getting to his left kidney, which essentially sent his renin levels up, shot his blood pressure through the roof. The little bit of blood loss that he had during his tonsillectomy was just enough to send that renin level up, and he was unable to auto-regulate from that point. We now know that he was probably hypertensive his entire life. We had no way of knowing because his pediatrician did not do regular blood pressure screenings as she should. If she would have started at 3, which is recommended by the American Academy of Pediatrics and the American Heart Association, we would have known then his blood pressure was elevated. Instead, it took a very routine surgery that should have been routine that ended up being almost catastrophic for him because there was this underlying condition that we didn't know was present. So with that one vital, that one blood pressure, could have eliminated a whole lot of things. It would not have changed what he had physically, but it would have allowed us to be able to know it was there, know it was present, and then in turn be able to treat it more of an outpatient basis than an emergent critical care type situation. So once we had that diagnosis, then we had treatment and we moved forward. So there was about a month that we were in the hospital that time. He came home for 2 weeks. He had a balloon angioplasty that was done 2 weeks following that. And when the doctor came out, he said he indeed had a significant blockage. He had a 99% blockage to his left kidney. He literally had 1% open to get blood in there. He goes, I have no idea how that kidney has not died yet. He said, but we were able to open it by 50%. It's a temporary measure. This will buy us some time until he can get older to have more inclusive surgery, which would indeed be some type of bypass surgery we were thinking. That time came about 2 years later. We had an auto kidney transplant when they went in and took his kidney out, removed that blocked section of artery, transplanted his kidney back into him. And from a physical standpoint, we were dealing with it. We were coping with it. From the very first time he came out of the hospital, our world was changed, diets was changed, sodium content is being monitored, everything that he's eating, the amount of fluid that he's taking, the blood pressure medications that he's on to keep everything leveled. We just did what we had to do. It was just something robotic. Somebody who has diabetes, you know what you have to do. There was no difference with this than Matthew being like some of his friends he has that have diabetes. So when Matthew came home from the hospital, he was a very different child. Different because he was deeper, I think, in a sense that we assumed it was the weight of the world on his shoulders. How do you not be that sick and not be in the hospital for that long and have all of this go on without having some emotional scarring? I would, as an adult. Most adults I know would. But there was something changed about him, something different. And we gave him a lot of opportunities to talk. You know, Matthew, if you want to talk, we're here. We're here to listen. If you have questions, if there's something, if you want to get mad, that's fine. If you want to talk about something, that's fine. But communicate with us. When you're ready, do that. Well, finally, one afternoon, that communication came. We were getting ready for bed. We'd all been sitting in the living room watching TV. Matthew's 4.5 at the time. His little brother was 2. Connor had fell asleep in my lap. So I got up to go put him in bed, and my husband got up to go get ready for bed. And I told Matthew, I said, I'll be back. We can sit and watch TV for a little while or read or whatever you want to do. He says, okay. So when I left, I come back up front. Matthew has every light in the house on. All the lamps, all the big lights. The TV is off, and he's sitting on the couch, and he's sitting up nice and straight with his legs crossed, and he's holding his hands. I said, Matthew, what are you doing? He said, I have to talk to you. I said, okay, let's talk. He said, you need to come sit down. I said, okay. So I sit down on the couch. I said, what's the matter? What's up? And he said, I have to talk to you, and I have to tell you something, but you have to promise not to get mad. I'm thinking, at this point, you could burn the house down, and we're probably good. I don't think I could get mad. You've been through so much, I'm not thinking. And Matthew is such a good child anyway. I mean, he doesn't even walk into another room if he's not asking, is that okay? Can I do it? So I said, okay, talk to him. And he says, Mama, when I was in the hospital, 4 angels came to get me. And I said, stop. Don't say anything else. I got up and I ran to the back and I ran in the bathroom and I got my husband. I said, you need to come up front and you need to sit down. I said, Matthew wants to talk to us. I don't know what's fixing to come out of his mouth, but you need to be there. And I said, just come sit neutral. Don't say anything. He says, okay. And my husband didn't question it, and that's unusual for him because he's like, why? And he didn't. He just walked up front and he sat down. I said, okay, Matthew. I said, now, tell Daddy what you told me. And he said, when I was in the hospital, 4 angels came to get me. And we didn't say anything. We just waited for him to talk and waited for him to say whatever he was going to say. And he proceeded to share one of the most amazing, beautiful stories with us that to this day still makes the hair stand up on the back of my neck. And there was so much love that came from him when he shared this, and so much relief that came off of his shoulders as he talked, that it was just amazing. And he said that these angels came to get him. It was 2 men and 2 women. He didn't know who it was at the time. And he said, I walked through a gray door. He said, and then everything was just white. He said, I mean just beautiful white. Not like white walls in a house. I mean just white. And he said, one of the ladies reached down and grabbed my hand, and she said, Matthew, it's time for you to come with us. And he said, I can't go. I have to ask my mom and dad. And she said, no, it's okay. Your mom and dad know. They're okay with it. You need to come with us. And he said, I felt like it was okay. He said, I don't know why, because I would never go with a stranger. I wouldn't normally do that, Mom. And I said, I know you wouldn't go with strangers. He said, but I felt so much safety, and I felt comfortable. It was okay. He said, and they took my hand. And 1 man and 1 woman took my hand. The other 2 angels were on the outside. And he said, and we just started walking. And he said, the further we walked, the more beautiful it got. And he said, I'm not seeing anything but white. He said, it's just beautiful. He said, and even though it was nothing, it was everything. And he said, it was nothing but love. And the only word that he could use that he just kept using over and over and over again was love. He said, I love you, and I love Dad, and I love Connor. He said, but the feeling there was unlike that, unlike anything like that. And he said they had on these beautiful white robes. They were outlined in blue. And he said, and that's all I saw. He said, we walked for a little while. He said, then the lady stopped, and she turned around, and she said, Matthew, it's not time yet. You need to go back to your mom and dad. And he said, I just looked at her, and he said, and I didn't want to come back. He said, please don't be mad, because I didn't want to come back. And I said, I'm glad that you felt that safety and that security, but I really am glad you're back, because I like kissing you every night. And he said, with that, she turned me around, and I just started walking. He said, the next thing I remember is everybody in my room crying. And when he said that, immediately I'm like, it was that day. It was that day he was leaving to go to New Orleans, because while he was talking, I didn't know when. I mean, we had been in the hospital for a month. It could have been any day. But when he said that, I said, that was the day. Because even from the time he woke up and he asked, why is everybody crying, there was no answer given. Everything was moving. It was just really fast and just boom, like that. So once he got to New Orleans and we had the discussion with the neurologist, nothing else was ever mentioned about that episode or what happened. We never talked about it. We were too tired and too focused on kidneys to think anything else about what had happened in that brief few minutes. And we just thought it was an anomaly. It's just one of those things. Okay, you move forward. And then when he shared this, it gave a lot of affirmation to what had happened that day and what we were seeing on the physical side. And now he was sharing with us something he saw, whatever that was, is what he saw and what he felt where he was. And we left it very open for him to be able to share with us as he wanted to and to talk about it as he wanted to. We didn't bring it up. It wasn't a big topic of conversation. We didn't ask a lot of questions. I wanted him to be able to share openly without any guidance from anybody. And he talked about it a lot, and it was always in a very positive way. It was always something that was really good for him. And his question to us was, does that mean I died? And I said, Matthew, I don't have that answer. There's nobody on earth that can answer that for you. I don't know that you died. I know where you went was beautiful. I know it was special. I know you've seen something unlike a lot of people get to experience and share. One day you can ask God that question and he'll answer it, and you won't be able to come back, but you'll have your answer one day. And he said, well, I feel like I was walking to see Jesus. He said, I didn't get to see him. I didn't get there, but I feel like I was on that path. And I said, well, one day you'll know. One day you'll have that answer. I said, for now, you've seen something that has built in your heart. It's changed a lot of things. It's deepened us. And then we'll just go with that. You know, you just live your life. You have purpose. I said, there's some reason why you're here. And that purpose will shine through one day. And that's all that we can hope for. And it just became part of our family. It just became something we knew. We do a lot of presentations with hypertension on the children's side. And inevitably, that part of it comes up in our presentations. We talk about the spiritual side of what we do. And people ask questions, you know, how has this changed your family? Did you have a faith? Did you have this? And I'll tell them, you know, we believed. We went to church sporadically, very sporadically. But we weren't an overly religious, zealous family. You know, we had our faith. Our prayers were done in quiet a lot of times. But when we were pushed into that situation, there was but one person I could turn to. And there was one person that was with me every day in that hospital. When my husband wasn't there, or Matthew was sleeping, or something else was going on, God was with me every single day. And I could feel that. I could feel that peace, and I could feel that presence at a time that I needed it. And a lot of people say, well, yeah, you know, people always find God when things are bad. It's because God is there to carry you when you can't walk anymore. And there were a lot of days that I just couldn't put my feet on the floor anymore. And he picked me up and he carried me through every single day. So from Matthew sharing that experience with us, it just kind of, you know, it was something that we saw was helping other people. We saw that it was able to inspire people that needed some kind of peace, some kind of understanding. Is it a definitive answer to anything? Nope. I don't think anybody has a definitive answer to that. I think he's seen a vision that has been inspiring. It's something that he knows in his heart what happened. He knows what he feels. We know how it's changed us. And I think that's a good thing. If it can bring some hope to somebody, I know for us as a family it has. It's been very therapeutic for us going through the process of sharing our story in a book now. You know, we have people say, well, why did you do that? Why would you want to put something out there? I said, well, the more people that we've talked to and the more people we've seen be able to have an impact from what he's gone through, not just from the specific, I walked with angels, but from the fact that you can still have a faith and you can still believe and know that even when things are bad, they're okay because you're going to get through it. You're going to come through the other side. Bad things happen. Whether you're a Christian, whether you're not a Christian, it doesn't matter. Bad things happen to everybody. You don't escape that. It's called being human. It's how you deal with it. It's the faith that you have and the walk that you have to be able to pull you through it. And that's something that we have found through that. I had an interviewer ask me, I guess about a week ago, he said, okay, did Matthew bring some kind of message back? Was there some great message, you know, somebody had a coin somewhere hid? And I said, no. I said, the message was that we needed to look at that life with a different set of eyes. And we need to open our hearts, and we need to be more compassionate and have more empathy for what people are going through, because everybody's going through something. It doesn't matter who you are, everybody has something. And I said, I think that's the message, is just for us to have an open heart and a compassion for other people. So about 2 weeks after Matthew had shared all of this with us, he comes in the office one day. I'm in my office working. I've been working on a picture project. And by profession, I'm a photographer, so I love pictures, always have. But since we had moved into our new house, I did not have one picture on our wall. Matthew got sick, and everything else stopped. We had our couches and our beds and our towels, and that was about the extent of it. Everything else just got put on hold. So I said, you know, Matthew's doing better. He's kind of stable. I want to get some pictures up and get them on the walls. Well, there was one picture that came to mind, because I'm thinking grandparents, our parents. We have none of this displayed. I have like the pictures of the kids that, you know, I wanted to put up. But I wanted to expand that into our family. And I said, there's this picture of my grandparents that I've always loved as a little girl. And it was on their 50th wedding anniversary. It was taken in front of their house. And my grandfather was giving my grandmother a kiss on the cheek. And I never met my grandfather. He passed when my mom was actually pregnant with me. My grandmother passed when I was 14. And all of these years, I've thought about my grandmother, and I've thought, God, I wish you could see what's going on in my life. I wish I could share these things with her. And as things have happened in our family and the families of my aunts and uncles and cousins and all of these people that loved her, I'm like, I wish she could know these things. Matthew gave me an affirmation that she knows everything that is going on with us. He comes in the office, and I had printed out this picture. It was on a slide. Anybody the old slides your parents or grandparents had? That's how we looked at pictures when we were little. We'd pull out the old dusty machine, and we would watch them, and they would go back under my mom's bed, and that was the end of it. So I had made a copy of this slide, scanned it, and I printed it out, and I just put this picture up on the shelf. So Matthew comes in, and he kisses me, and he just said, I just came in to check on you. And when he turns to walk out, he was going back up front to play, and he sees the picture, and he stops dead in his tracks, and he reaches for it, and his hands are almost shaking, and he said, why do you have this picture? And I said, what do you mean? And I looked at him because he's very anxious, and it's upset almost with him. He goes, why do you have this picture? And his little eyes fill up with tears, and he takes it off of the shelf, and I said, Matthew, what is the matter? I said, that's my grandparents. I said, I just printed this out. I want to display it. And he said, this is not your grandparents. I said, this is Mama's mom and dad. These are my grandparents that lived in Kentucky. And he said, no, it's not, Mama. He said, these are two of the angels that walked with me. He said, this is the lady that held my hand. And I said, Matthew, you've seen her. He said, I am telling you, this is the lady that held my hand. She's the one that made me feel so safe that I didn't want to come back. He said, I felt like it was okay to go with her. And he said, you really know him? I said, yes, I do. I know my grandmother. I never met my grandfather. And he's just standing there looking at it. And he looks at me. He said, I can't believe you know these people. I said, I do, Matthew. He said, you've seen them, so you know who they are. I said, I know my grandmother. So it's almost like he's trying to justify to himself, oh my gosh. At that moment, there was a connection there that I knew a little bit of what he had seen. Wasn't there, didn't experience it with him, but there was a connection. He was so relieved and just so, like, this is okay. He grabbed the picture and out he went. And he was just as content, as happy as he could. And I just sat there with the hair standing up on the back of my neck going, oh my goodness. Not expecting that in the least. So from there, it just became part of our family. It's just what we knew. We've shared it with other people. It's grown from there. And the presentations that we do with the Pediatric Blood Pressure Foundation, we talk about it. And we decided, if it's helping one person, then that's what we intended to do. And that was the reason behind us writing this book. And for it coming to this point and us sharing this story is that if it can provide a little bit of peace or a little bit of comfort to someone who needs it, that's all that we hope for. By no means is it the final tell-all on what happens to us. It's just our simple story and a vision that Matthew had of where he went and what he experienced. So, Matthew, did you want to read the last part of it? Matthew's going to close us out today, so he's going to read the last part of the book.
Hello, my name is Matthew Goodwin, as most of you may already know. My story, which is told in The Boy Back from Heaven, has changed my life forever. Can you lower this? It has been 6 years since my journey started. I am now an 11-year-old 6th grader, and my experience has taught me that heaven does exist and that it is a beautiful place. There is not an ounce of suffering, sickness, pain, and best of all, there is no sin. I will never forget my journey because of it. I will never forget my journey. Because of it, I will never fear death. I know that death is just rebirth. After rebirth, you will live in a miraculous place called heaven. When someone dies, I know they are going to feel better and have peace forever. I know that they are living with God. My story has impacted many people's lives. Hopefully, my experience has given them a better understanding of heaven. In John 3:16 it is written, "For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, for whoever believes in him shall not perish but have eternal life." I have been shown a glimpse of heaven, and I know that I will never die. Even after my body leaves this earth, I will go to heaven. I am appreciative that Christ died for us so that we have the privilege of going to heaven. My eyes have witnessed it, and I know how stunning it is. My illness has not been all negative. There have been many positives from being able to share my story, and I hope that it continues to help others.
When we finished the book, I told Matthew, I said, okay, I said, we've wrote all this together because we collaborated on everything. And I told him, I said, I want you to finish it. I want you to write the very last chapter. And I said, I don't care what you say. I don't care what you write. I want you to finish it from your heart. And he said, okay, done. He went in his room and he came out about 30 minutes later with that. He goes, is that good? I said, perfect, done. So I said, that will close out your story. But if there's one thing that I want you guys to leave with today is to know that if you have children or you have grandchildren, there is a passion that is so close to our heart, and it's pediatric hypertension, especially those that are in nursing, going into that as a profession. Make sure that your children and your grandchildren have routine blood pressure screenings. If Matthew had had a blood pressure screening at the age of 3, a lot of the intense care that he had to have could have been bypassed. So because of that, we have created the National Pediatric Blood Pressure Awareness Foundation, which is a national nonprofit that works in communities all over to educate and advocate on the importance of hypertension awareness and blood pressure screenings. As I mentioned earlier, it's recommended that every child start having routine blood pressure screenings at the age of 3. This is something that is important. In most cases, it will be normal, but if there are any changes year to year, your doctor can see that in the chart and see the trends and be able to get on that as quickly as possible. So we'd like to open it up to questions now if anybody has any questions or comments before we sign. Yes, ma'am.
My question is for Matthew. Any ideas on the other 2 angels on it?
I've never really found an answer for that.
You want to repeat that?
I've never really found an answer for that. I just know it's 2 other angels.
Nobody that we've been able to pinpoint to say that, oh, that's somebody I've seen or recognized. He just knew it was another man and another woman. Yes, ma'am.
2 angels that you did see, the grandparents, were they the age they were in the picture, or were they younger or older?
They were younger.
A little bit younger, but he said that the features, similarities were all there. And when he saw the picture, because the picture that was taken, they were much older. I would say probably late 70s, sis? Late 60s, early 70s. But he was able to see and know and recognize that's them. Yeah. Anybody else? Yes, ma'am.
The Goodwins, where were your grandparents from?
The Masseys. My mom is actually from Paducah. She was born and raised here. All of her brothers and sisters stayed here. She's the only one that left and went south. But her mom was a Massey. My mom was a Massey, and they were from right out there at High Point. It's where they lived. That's where my mom grew up. Yeah.
Your grandpa then was not from this area?
He was. He was from here as well. Yes. Yes, he was a Massey. And my grandmother was a Clemens before she married. Yeah. Anybody else? No, I would like to thank you all for your time. I know, there are probably better things you could probably do with your time, but we thank you for listening. And if anybody has any questions or wants to stop by and ask afterwards, we'd love to hear them. Thank you.